The mistake that shook the galaxy. The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the mining colony, as Admiral Vexitar studied the settlement through his command ship's viewports. The Zephyrian fleet hung in orbit like deadly silver daggers, their weapon systems powered and ready. Below them, the human colony sprawled across the planet's surface, completely unaware of the death hovering above their heads. Vexitar's scaled hands drummed against the command console as he reviewed the intelligence reports. The humans had established this mining operation 6 months ago, extracting valuable trilithium crystals that the Zephyrian Empire desperately needed for their war machine. Today they would claim both the crystals and send a message to the growing human presence in this sector of space. "Admiral, our scouts report minimal defensive capabilities," reported Subcommander Jelkar, his voice carrying the typical Zephyrian coldness. "Mostly civilian mining equipment and a handful of security personnel. This will be a simple harvest operation." Vexitar nodded, his reptilian features showing satisfaction. The Zephyrians had built their empire through calculated strikes against weaker species. They would descend, take what they needed, eliminate resistance, and move on. It was efficient, clean, and had worked for centuries across dozens of worlds. "Begin the descent," Vexitar commanded. "Standard protocol. Secure the mining facilities first, then deal with the population." The attack began at dawn. Zephyrian dropships screamed through the atmosphere like metallic meteors, their engines creating sonic booms that shattered windows across the colony. The human settlers barely had time to understand what was happening before the first energy. Weapons began firing. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing supply reports in the colony's command center when the attack alarm started wailing. She grabbed her sidearm and rushed to the communications array, her heart pounding as she watched the sensor readings. 12 enemy vessels, military configuration, closing fast on all major installations. "This is Colony Command to all stations," Sarah spoke into the emergency channel, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are under attack. All security teams to defensive positions, civilians to emergency shelters immediately." But even as she gave the orders, Sarah knew they were woefully outmatched. The colony had been established as a peaceful mining operation, not a military outpost. Their security force consisted of 15 personnel armed with basic weapons, facing what appeared to be a full military assault. The Zephyrian ground forces moved with mechanical precision through the colony. Their advanced armor deflected the few shots that the human security teams managed to fire, while their energy weapons cut through defensive barriers like paper. Within 30 minutes, organized resistance had collapsed. Sarah found herself trapped in the education center where she had gone to check on the children, including her 8-year-old daughter Emma. The building housed 43 young humans, ranging from toddlers to teenagers, all children of the mining families. As the sounds of battle grew closer, Sarah held Emma close while trying to maintain calm among the frightened children. The door to the education center exploded inward, and 3 Zephyrian soldiers entered with weapons raised. The children screamed and huddled together as the 7-foot-tall reptilian aliens surveyed the room with cold, calculating eyes. "Interesting," said the lead soldier, speaking in accented but fluent human standard. "Intelligence reports mentioned a population of adult workers, but made no reference to offspring." Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between the soldiers and the children. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen, Colony Defense Coordinator. These are non-combatants. Under galactic conventions, they're protected civilians." The Zephyrian tilted his head, studying her with golden eyes that showed no emotion. "Galactic conventions apply to recognized species engaged in formal warfare, human. Your kind has not yet achieved such status." Fear turned to ice in Sarah's stomach. She had heard rumors about Zephyrian tactics, but seeing their casual dismissal of basic civilized behavior made the reality hit home. These beings operated by rules that placed no value on concepts like mercy or protection of innocence. Subcommander Zelkar arrived minutes later to assess the situation. He looked over the cowering children with the same expression one might use to examine interesting specimens in a laboratory. "Admiral Vexitar will want to see this," he said to his soldiers. "The intelligence value alone could be significant. Human offspring development, social bonding patterns, psychological pressure points. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. You can't seriously be considering taking children as prisoners. Even by your standards, this has to cross some line. Jelkar's laugh was like grinding metal. Your species thinks in terms of lines and boundaries, human. We think in terms of efficiency and advantage. These young ones represent valuable research opportunities and excellent leverage for future negotiations with human territories. The next hour passed in a nightmare of organization and transport. The Zephyrians herded the children onto their transport ships with the same casual efficiency they used for loading cargo. Parents who tried to reach their children were stunned, unconscious, or killed outright. Sarah managed to stay with the group only because the Zephyrians found her leadership useful for keeping the children manageable. As their transport ship lifted off from Kepler 442b's surface, Sarah held Emma and looked out at the burning colony below. Most of the adult population lay dead in the ruins of their homes. The mining facilities were being systematically stripped of their valuable equipment and resources. But in the colony's communication center, a dying technician named Rodriguez managed one final act of defiance. With his last breath, he activated the emergency beacon that would carry news of the attack across human space. The message was simple, but would shake the foundations of galactic politics. Kepler 442b attacked. Colony destroyed. Children taken prisoner by Zephyrian forces. Aboard the Zephyrian command ship, Admiral Vexitar reviewed the intelligence reports about their unexpected prizes. 43 human offspring, ranging from 3 to 17 years old, now occupied holding cells in his ship's lower decks. Dr. Zithara, the fleet's chief scientist, was practically vibrating with excitement over the research possibilities. Admiral, this is an unprecedented opportunity, the scientist reported. We've studied adult human physiology, but we know nothing about their development stages, psychological formation, or family bonding structures. These specimens could provide insights that give us tremendous advantages in future conflicts. Vexitar was less interested in scientific research than strategic value. What about their use as bargaining tools? Immense, Dr. Zithara confirmed. Human attachment to their young appears to be even stronger than most mammalian species. The emotional leverage they represent could be worth entire star systems in negotiations. As the Zephyrian fleet departed Kepler 442b for their fortress, world of Zephus Prime, news of the attack spread through human space like wildfire. The emergency beacon's message reached Earth within hours, and the reaction was unlike anything in recorded human history. Ambassador Krelvoth of the Altarian Confederacy was attending a routine Galactic Council session when the news broke. The elderly alien had spent decades studying various species across the galaxy, and he alone among the assembled delegates understood the magnitude of what had just occurred. Colleagues, he said, rising from his seat with obvious distress, I must speak on a matter of extreme urgency. The Zephyrian Empire has just made what may be the most catastrophic strategic error in galactic history. The other delegates looked puzzled. The Zephyrians had conducted similar raids dozens of times against various species. What made this different? Krelvoth's voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom as he explained. They have taken human, children. Not adult prisoners, not military personnel, but children. Those of you who have studied human psychology and history will understand why this represents an existential threat to the Zephyrian Empire. Several delegates from species that had encountered humans nodded gravely. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their unusual protective instincts toward their young. Unlike many species that produced large numbers of offspring with high mortality rates, humans invested enormous emotional and social resources in each individual child. The Zephyrians believe they have acquired valuable research subjects and leverage, Krelvoth continued. What they have actually done is awaken something in humanity that should have remained dormant. They have challenged the most fundamental, driving force of human civilization. Back on Earth, the reaction was indeed unprecedented. Every major government received the emergency transmission simultaneously, and for the first time in human history, all political divisions became instantly irrelevant. The World Council convened an emergency session, but no debate was necessary. Every delegate understood that this was not a political issue, but a species-level crisis. General Patricia Harrison, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, stood before the assembled leaders with a grim expression. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 43 human children in alien hands. Every parent on Earth understands what this means. Every human being with a heartbeat knows what our response must be. Within 6 hours, the largest military mobilization in human history was underway. Every spacefaring nation contributed ships, personnel, and resources to what became known as the Terran Rescue Fleet. Corporate rivalries dissolved as private military contractors donated equipment. Colonial militias abandoned their posts to join the effort. Even civilian transport vessels were retrofitted with weapons systems. Commander Marcus Drake, a veteran of the Proxima conflicts, found himself appointed as fleet commander not through political appointment, but through unanimous acclamation. His own daughter had died in a colonial accident 5 years earlier, and every parent in the fleet understood that he would let nothing stop him from bringing those children home. The fleet that assembled at Luna Station was unlike anything ever seen in human space. 300 warships of various classes, supported by twice as many transport and support vessels. Nearly 1 million personnel, representing every branch of human military service and several that had been invented specifically for this mission. But the most remarkable aspect was not the size of the fleet, but the absolute unity of purpose that drove it. There were no political arguments, no resource disputes, no territorial considerations. Every human involved understood the mission with perfect clarity: bring the children home regardless of cost. As news of the mobilization spread throughout the galaxy, other species watched with growing amazement and concern. The humans, previously regarded as a relatively minor spacefaring species, were displaying a level of organization and determination that defied all previous assessments. Ambassador Krelvoth sent urgent messages to every contact he had in Zephyrian space, trying to warn them of what was coming. But the Zephyrian leadership, drunk on their easy victory at Kepler 442b, dismissed the warnings as typical diplomatic posturing. Admiral Vextar was studying reports of human fleet movements when his communications officer approached with obvious nervousness. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple diplomatic messages from various species, all concerning our recent acquisition of human specimens." Vextar barely looked up from his tactical displays. "Standard diplomatic protests, I assume. File them with the others." "Sir, with respect, these messages are different. Ambassador Krelvoth of the Altarians is specifically warning us to return the human young immediately. He claims that our empire faces extinction if we proceed with current plans." This got Vextar's attention. Krelvoth was known throughout the galaxy as a careful, measured diplomat who never engaged in hyperbole. If he was using language like extinction, he believed the threat was real. But as Vextar read the detailed warnings, his reptilian nature reasserted itself. The messages spoke of human protective instincts and unprecedented mobilization, but the Zephyrians had faced desperate species before. Their fortress world of Zephys Prime had never been successfully attacked. Their fleet was among the most powerful in the galaxy. What could a single species of mammals possibly do against the might of the Zephyrian Empire? The answer to that question was already underway as the Terran Rescue Fleet completed its preparations and began the journey toward Zephys Prime. At the fleet's head, Commander Drake stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable, watching the stars wheel past at faster-than-light speeds. Behind him, nearly 1 million human beings shared a single thought that would soon echo across the galaxy. They had taken our children, and that was a mistake they would regret for whatever time they had left. When humanity united, the news of the captured children reached Earth's major population centers within hours of the emergency transmission. In New York, London, Beijing, Mumbai, and São Paulo, massive crowds gathered in public squares, their faces reflecting a mixture of rage and determination that transcended all cultural boundaries. For the first time in recorded history, every human being on Earth shared an identical emotional response to a single event. Commander Marcus Drake stood in the operations center of Luna Station, watching real-time feeds from across the solar system as the largest military mobilization in human history unfolded before his eyes. Ships that had been enemies just days before now formed up in perfect formation, their crews working together with an efficiency that defied explanation. "Sir, the African Federation has just contributed their entire deep space fleet," reported Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez, Drake's newly appointed Chief of Staff. "That brings us to 273 combat vessels, with more arriving hourly." Drake nodded, his weathered face showing the strain of coordinating an operation of unprecedented scale. At 55, he had seen enough warfare to understand the logistics involved in moving even a small fleet across interstellar distances. What they were attempting should have taken months of preparation. Instead, it was happening in days through sheer force of will. "What's our status on the supply chain?" Drake asked, knowing that ammunition and fuel would determine their chances more than raw numbers of ships. "Corporate manufacturing has shifted to full war production," Rodriguez replied, consulting her tablet. "Stellar Dynamics has retooled their entire industrial base to produce military-grade weapons. The Miners' Union has pledged unlimited trilithium supplies. Even the agricultural cooperatives are contributing by producing emergency rations." The scale of cooperation was staggering. Companies that had spent decades in bitter competition were now sharing proprietary technology freely. Labor unions that had never agreed on anything were coordinating their efforts with mathematical precision. Political parties that defined themselves by their opposition to each other were voting unanimously on emergency measures. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading xenopsychologist, had been hastily assigned to Drake's staff to help understand their enemy. She approached the command table with a concerned expression, carrying a thick folder of intelligence reports. "Commander, I've been analyzing everything we know about Zephyrian psychology and tactics," she said, spreading out holographic displays showing alien ship configurations and battle patterns. "They're not going to expect this level of response. Their entire strategic doctrine is based on overwhelming smaller, divided opponents." Drake studied the tactical analyses with professional interest. The Zephyrians had built their empire through calculated aggression against species that couldn't mount unified resistance. They excelled at exploiting political divisions and resource limitations that prevented effective military coordination. "What happens when they realize they've miscalculated?" Drake asked. Dr. Vasquez's expression grew darker. "Based on their historical patterns, they'll likely accelerate their timeline. If they believe they're facing a serious threat, they might eliminate the children rather than risk them being rescued." The thought sent a chill through the operations center. Every person present understood that they were racing against time, but hearing it stated so bluntly made the urgency painfully real. Meanwhile, aboard the Zephyrian transport ship carrying the captured children toward Zephyrus Prime, the young prisoners were displaying the remarkable adaptability that would soon become legendary throughout the galaxy. Despite their fear and confusion, they had begun organizing themselves into a support structure that surprised even their captors. Emma Chen, at 8 years old, had emerged as one of the group's natural leaders. Her mother's military training had given her exposure to emergency procedures and crisis management. Knowledge she now shared with the other children in ways their alien captors couldn't understand. "Remember what my mom taught us about staying calm," Emma whispered to a group of younger children huddled in their holding cell. "When scary things happen, we take care of each other. That's what humans do." 17-year-old Michael Torres, the oldest of the captured children, had taken responsibility for the teenagers and was working to keep everyone's spirits up. Despite being terrified himself, he led daily exercises and organized storytelling, sessions that helped maintain morale. Dr. Zithara observed these behaviors with growing fascination. The Zephyrian scientist had expected the human young to become increasingly disorganized and desperate as their captivity continued. Instead, they were demonstrating social cooperation and emotional resilience that exceeded her theoretical models. "Subject group continues to display unprecedented adaptive responses," she noted in her research logs. "Rather than succumbing to despair, the specimens are forming complex support networks. The older individuals are assuming protective roles toward younger ones, while the younger specimens are contributing to group morale through what appears to be instinctive optimism." What Dr. Zithara didn't understand was that she was witnessing fundamental human characteristics that had been forged through millions of years of evolution. Humans had survived as a species by protecting their young and supporting each other through adversity. Even these children, torn from their families and facing an uncertain fate, carried those survival instincts in their very DNA. Back in human space, the Terran rescue fleet continued to grow as ships arrived from every corner of human civilization. The outer colonies, despite being the most vulnerable to Zephyrian retaliation, contributed disproportionately to the effort. Asteroid miners donated their industrial ships for conversion to weapons platforms. Scientific research vessels were hastily retrofitted with military sensors and communication arrays. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commander of the European Space Navy, brought her fleet to Luna Station and immediately requested a meeting with Drake. The two officers had fought on opposite sides during the Martian Independence War, but now they embraced like old friends united by a cause greater than their past conflicts. "Marcus, I've been analyzing the tactical situation," Mitchell said, activating a holographic display of the Zephys system. "Their fortress world is heavily defended, but they're not expecting an attack of this magnitude. If we can achieve strategic surprise, we might be able to penetrate their defenses before they can organize a proper response." Drake studied the intelligence data with growing optimism. Zephys Prime was indeed a fortress world, surrounded by orbital defense platforms and protected by a substantial fleet. But the Zephyrians had designed their defenses to repel conventional attacks by divided enemies, not a unified assault by a species fighting for their children. "What about civilian casualties?" Drake asked, knowing that Zephys Prime housed millions of non-combatant Zephyrians. Mitchell's expression softened. "We've developed precision targeting protocols. Our goal is to neutralize military assets and rescue the children, not to commit genocide. We're not like them, Marcus." The distinction was important. Throughout human space, military planners were working overtime to develop strategies that would achieve their objectives without unnecessary destruction. The children had been taken by the Zephyrian military leadership, not by every individual member of their species. As the fleet prepared for departure, families of the captured children gathered at viewing stations to see their defenders off. The scenes were broadcast across human space, creating a shared emotional experience that united billions of people in common purpose. Maria Santos, whose 6-year-old son Carlos was among the prisoners, stood at the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the massive fleet form up for departure. Beside her, hundreds of other parents maintained a vigil that had been ongoing for 3 days. "Bring them home," she whispered, speaking for every parent watching the ships prepare to jump to faster-than-light speed. On Earth, the response continued to build momentum. Children who were too young to understand the details of what was happening sensed the adults' determination and began their own contributions. Schools organized letter-writing campaigns to the captured children. Art classes created pictures and videos that were uploaded to the fleet's communication systems for eventual delivery. The psychological effect on the rescue force was profound. Every member of the fleet carried with them the knowledge that an entire species was counting on their success. They weren't just military personnel following orders. They were humanity's chosen champions in a cause that defined their very identity as a species. Ambassador Krelvoth continued his desperate attempts to warn the Zephyrian leadership about what was approaching their territory. His messages grew increasingly urgent as reports reached him about the size and determination of the human fleet. "Admiral Vexitar," he transmitted directly to the Zephyrian commander, "you must understand that you have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Human protective instincts toward their young exceed anything in our galactic experience. Return the children immediately while you still can." Vexitar's response was dismissive. "Respected Ambassador, your concerns are noted but unnecessary. The human fleet, while larger than expected, poses no threat to our fortress world. Our defenses have never been breached. These mammals will learn the cost of challenging the Zephyrian Empire." Krelvoth's final message carried the weight of prophecy. "Admiral, I have studied dozens of species across the galaxy.
I have seen civilizations rise and fall based on single decisions. You have made the decision that will end your empire. May whatever deities you worship have mercy on your people, because humanity will not. As the Terran rescue fleet completed
its preparations and began the jump sequence toward Zephyrus Prime, the galaxy held its breath. Neutral species watched their sensors with fascination and fear, understanding that they were about to witness either humanity's greatest triumph or most catastrophic defeat. The fleet that emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephyrus system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Nearly 400 ships of various classes, all bearing the same insignia, a blue and green planet surrounded by protective hands. It was a symbol that would soon become legendary throughout known space. Commander Drake stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical displays showing Zephyrian defensive positions throughout the system. Behind him, his officers worked with quiet efficiency, their faces reflecting the absolute determination that had driven them across the galaxy. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet," reported Communications Officer Janet Kim. "Put it through," Drake ordered. Admiral Vexitar's image appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features showing surprise at the size of the human force. "Human Commander, you have entered Zephyrian space without authorization. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences." Drake's response was calm but carried the weight of an entire species behind it. "Admiral Vextar, you are holding 43 human children prisoner. Return them immediately, and we will consider limiting our response to merely destroying your military capability." Vextar's laugh was harsh. "You threaten the Zephyrian Empire over 43 specimens. Your species is even more irrational than our intelligence suggested." "Admiral," Drake said quietly, "you've made one mistake already. Don't compound it by underestimating what a parent will do to protect their child, what an entire species will do when their children are threatened." The transmission ended, and Drake turned to his fleet commanders. Around him, nearly 1 million human beings prepared for the most important battle in their species' history. They had come across the galaxy for one purpose, and nothing in the universe would stop them from achieving it. The Battle of Zephyrus Prime was about to begin. Part 3. The Price of Touching Earth's Young. The Battle of Zephyrus Prime began not with the thunderous roar of conventional warfare, but with a silence that seemed to stretch across the vacuum of space itself. The Terran rescue fleet hung motionless. At the edge of the system, 400 ships arranged in perfect formation, while the Zephyrian defenders scrambled to respond to a threat they had never imagined possible. Commander Drake watched the tactical displays with the patience of a predator. Every ship in his fleet was crewed by volunteers who had crossed the galaxy for one reason: to bring 43 children home. The weight of that purpose gave them an advantage no military academy could teach. "Sir, Zephyrian orbital platforms are powering up their main weapons," reported Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez. "They're moving their fleet into defensive positions around the planet." Drake nodded, having expected this response. The Zephyrians were following their standard defensive doctrine, designed to repel conventional attacks by creating overlapping fields of fire around their fortress world. It was a strategy that had worked against every previous enemy they had faced, but the humans weren't following conventional attack patterns. "Signal the fleet," Drake ordered. "Execute Shepard Protocol." Across the human formation, ships began moving with a coordination that defied military logistics. Instead of advancing in traditional battle lines, they scattered into dozens of smaller groups, each following seemingly random flight paths toward the planet. To Zephyrian observers, it looked like chaos. Admiral Vextar watched the human advance from his command ship's bridge, his reptilian features showing confusion. "What are they doing? This formation makes no tactical sense." His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with growing bewilderment. "Sir, they're not following any recognized attack pattern. Some groups are heading for our orbital platforms, others toward the fleet, and several appear to be making direct runs at the planet's surface." What the Zephyrians couldn't understand was that they were witnessing the application of human pack-hunting instincts to space warfare. Every group had a specific objective, and every ship was prepared to sacrifice itself to ensure that at least some of their forces reached the children. The first wave of human ships struck the orbital defense platforms with devastating effect. The platforms had been designed to destroy large, slow-moving targets approaching along predictable vectors. Instead, they faced small, agile groups attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Captain Lisa Park, commanding the destroyer Resolute, led her squadron in a direct assault on Platform 7. Her ships moved with the desperate efficiency of parents fighting for their children's lives, taking tremendous damage but never wavering from their objective. "Platform 7 is down," came the report across the fleet communication network. "Repeat, Platform 7 is neutralized." Similar reports flooded in from across the battle space as human forces systematically dismantled defenses that had protected Zephys Prime for centuries. The Zephyrian defenders fought with professional skill, but they were facing an enemy driven by emotions they couldn't comprehend. Meanwhile, the main Zephyrian fleet moved to intercept the human advance, confident that their superior firepower would carry the day. Admiral Vextar led the engagement personally, bringing his flagship into direct confrontation with Commander Drake's Indomitable. The space battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The Zephyrians fought with cold precision and superior technology, but the humans fought with something that transcended tactical doctrine: absolute, unwavering determination. "Their weapons are more advanced than ours," reported Drake's tactical officer as energy beams tore past the Indomitable's hull. "But sir, they're falling back. Every time we take damage and keep coming, they seem more shocked." Drake understood what his officer was observing. The Zephyrians were used to enemies who retreated when faced with superior firepower. They had never encountered opponents who would continue advancing while their ships were literally falling apart around them. Captain Sarah Chen, who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in the fleet, led a small group of fast ships directly toward the planet's surface. Her daughter Emma was somewhere in the fortress below, and nothing in the universe would stop her from reaching her child. "Sarah, you're taking too much fire," came Drake's voice over the communication channel. "Pull back and wait for support." "Negative, Commander," Sarah replied, her ship shuddering under enemy weapons fire. "My daughter is down there. We're going in." Her squadron broke through the planetary defense grid through sheer audacity, their ships trailing fire and debris as they headed for the surface. Behind them, the main human fleet continued to batter the Zephyrian defenses with relentless determination. On the surface of Zephys Prime, the captured human children felt the ground shake as the battle raged overhead. Dr. Zithara had moved them to what she believed was a secure facility deep underground. But even there, the vibrations of orbital bombardment were clearly felt. Emma Chen looked up at the reinforced ceiling of their prison, her young face showing hope for the first time since their capture. "That's them," she told the other children. "That's our people coming for us." 17-year-old Michael Torres nodded, tears streaming down his face. "My dad always said that humans never abandon their own. I guess he was right." The children began to sing, their voices joining together in a hymn that their parents had taught them. The sound echoed through the underground facility, reaching even their Zephyrian guards, who listened with growing unease. Dr. Zithara watched the children's behavior with scientific fascination tinged by something she had never experienced before: doubt. Her research had shown her the bonds between human parents and offspring, but witnessing the reality of an entire species mobilizing for these children challenged everything she thought she understood about rational behavior. Above ground, Captain Sarah Chen's squadron had fought their way to the planetary surface, their ships landing in the fortress complex with emergency maneuvers that should have been impossible. As the landing ramps dropped, Sarah emerged with her assault team, their faces hidden behind tactical masks but their purpose written in every movement. The Zephyrian ground forces that tried to stop them encountered something they had never faced before: humans fighting for their children. The tactical doctrine that had served the aliens well against other species proved useless against opponents who treated their own survival as secondary to their mission. "Emma!" Sarah called out as her team fought through the facility's corridors. "Emma, can you hear me?" Deep in the underground complex, Emma Chen heard her mother's voice echoing through the ventilation system. She stood up, her 8-year-old voice carrying clearly through the facility. "Mom, we're here. We're all here." The sound of her daughter's voice gave Sarah strength she didn't know she possessed. Her team moved through the facility like a force of nature, brushing aside resistance with the efficiency of evolution itself. Nothing that stood between a human parent and their child could survive the encounter. When the reinforced door to the children's holding area finally burst open, the reunion scene that followed would become one of the most famous moments in galactic history. 43 human children rushed into the arms of their rescuers, their joy and relief transmitted across the galaxy through combat cameras that captured every moment. But the battle was far from over. Even as the rescue teams secured the children and began moving them to evacuation ships, the space battle above continued to rage. Admiral Vextar, realizing that his fortress was being overrun, made one final desperate decision. "If we cannot hold the planet, we will deny it to the humans," he announced to his fleet. "Prepare planetary bombardment weapons. We will sterilize the surface." The order sent shockwaves through even his own crew. Planetary bombardment would not only kill the human rescue teams, but also millions of Zephyrian civilians living on the planet's surface. Sub-Commander Jelkar turned to face his superior, his reptilian features showing something unprecedented: moral revulsion. "Admiral, there are civilians down there, our own people." Vextar's response was cold. "Acceptable losses in defense of the Empire." But Jelkar had been watching the human rescue operation, and something about their absolute dedication to protecting their young had affected him profoundly. For the first time in his military career, he refused a direct order. "I will not fire on civilians," he stated flatly. The mutiny spread through the Zephyrian fleet like wildfire. Officers and crew members who had witnessed human parents crossing the galaxy to save their children found themselves unable to participate in the mass murder that Vextar was ordering. Within hours, the Zephyrian fleet was in complete disarray. Some ships attempted to carry out the bombardment order, only to be stopped by their own crew members. Others surrendered outright to the human forces, their officers requesting asylum rather than participation in genocide. Admiral Vextar's flagship, isolated and abandoned by most of his fleet, made one final attempt to destroy the evacuation ships carrying the human children. But Commander Drake's Indomitable intercepted them, and in the brief but decisive engagement that followed, the Zephyrian command ship was destroyed. As the last of the human children were safely aboard the evacuation ships, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. The Zephyrian Empire's most powerful fleet lay in ruins, their fortress world captured, and their military leadership eliminated. But the cost had been paid in full understanding of what they had attempted to do. Ambassador Krelvoth arrived in the Zephys system just as the battle was ending, leading a delegation from the Galactic Council to witness the aftermath. What he found challenged every assumption about warfare and civilization that the galaxy's elder species had developed over millennia. The humans, despite their overwhelming victory, were providing medical aid to wounded Zephyrian survivors. Their rescue ships were treating alien wounded alongside their own casualties. Most remarkably, they were already working to restore basic services to Zephyrian civilian populations on the planet's surface. "Commander Drake," Krelvoth said as he met with the human leader aboard the Indomitable, "your species has achieved something unprecedented. You have won a total military victory, while maintaining your moral principles." Drake looked tired but satisfied. Behind him, holographic displays showed all 43 children safely aboard medical ships, receiving treatment and beginning their journey home. "Ambassador, we came here for one reason, to bring our children home. We've done that. Everything else is just politics." But the implications of the Battle of Zephys Prime extended far beyond the rescue of 43 children. News of the conflict spread throughout the galaxy, carrying with it a lesson that would reshape interstellar relations for centuries to come. Species that had previously dismissed humanity as a minor player in galactic affairs suddenly found themselves reconsidering their assessments. The humans had demonstrated that they possessed not only the will to fight for their young, but the ability to unite their entire species behind that fight. Dr. Zithara, now a prisoner aboard one of the human ships, continued her research with a new understanding of her subjects. In her final report, she wrote, "Human protective instincts toward their offspring represent the most powerful motivational force I have encountered in 40 years of xenobiological study. Any species that threatens human children does so at the risk of their own extinction." The rescued children themselves became symbols of human resilience and adaptability. Their stories of survival, courage, and hope during their captivity inspired artwork, literature, and music throughout human space. Emma Chen, the 8-year-old who had helped organize her fellow prisoners, became known as the Little General for her leadership during the crisis. More importantly, their rescue established a new principle in galactic law, the Terra Protection Accord, signed by every major species within 6 months of the battle, established absolute protection for the young of all sentient species. The penalty for violating this protection was simple: total economic and military isolation, enforced by every other member of the galactic community. Years later, as the children grew to adulthood and took their places in human society, they carried with them the knowledge that their entire species had united to bring them home. The lesson became part of human culture. We protect our own, no matter the cost, no matter the distance, no matter the odds. The Zephyrian Empire never recovered from their defeat at Zephyrus Prime. Their military leadership was replaced by civilians who prioritized peace and cooperation over conquest. Admiral Vextar became a cautionary tale told throughout their space. The leader who destroyed an empire by underestimating the power of a parent's love. Commander Drake returned to Earth as humanity's greatest hero, but he always insisted that the real heroes were the children who had survived their ordeal with courage and hope intact. In his memoirs, he wrote, "We didn't win the Battle of Zephyrus Prime through superior tactics or technology. We won because we were fighting for something more important than victory. We were fighting for the future of our species, embodied in 43 brave children." The galaxy learned a lesson that day that would never be forgotten. Humanity had announced its presence on the galactic stage not through conquest or expansion, but through the simple declaration that their children were sacred. Touch them at your peril. And in the years that followed, as human space expanded and humanity took its place among the galaxy's great powers, that lesson remained at the heart of their civilization. They would explore, they would trade, they would make friends and allies among the stars, but their children would always come first.